Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining me again. This is Dr. Stephen Walker, broadcasting live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I'm a licensed psychologist trying to do my part to normalize mental health, conversations about mental health, demystify mental health and mental illness. You know, as you guys all know who have logged on live or who catch it after I post, we all have a degree of mental illness, every single one of us, and we need to be dealing with that. We need to be working on that. And this is my attempt to normalize conversations about mental health and have on interesting guests. Tonight we have a great guest who's going to come on and talk to us about how to help our kids with remote learning. Her name's Dr. Carrie Morera. She's written a great book. Let me post that for you guys so you can take a look at that link. And you can check out the book and you can ask us questions. But again, remember, we start with a topic, we move into something else. We can move in and out. You can ask us different topics about mental health, mental illness. If you're struggling with something, do not hesitate to ask a question about whatever's on your mind. Just as a way to reminding everybody about my mental health fund. It's called helpahuman.org. You can help somebody who can't afford treatment right now. You can help somebody get treatment. All the 100% of the proceeds go directly to funding someone's treatment. So if you have some time, check out helpahuman.org and help a human. So let's talk a little bit about our guest, Dr. Carrie Morera. She's a licensed psychologist, licensed school psychologist. She works in the field. She's been in the field for many years. She's written a great book about how to help kids and parents with their studying, with their goals and schooling. And, you know, we're all going through a big crisis here of mental health and in this country right now. So she's going to come on and talk about her experiences in the field, things that she's going to give you tips to help your kids who are struggling or not struggling, parent, how self-care with parents and all of that. So, but please remember, the key to these live streams is for you as the viewer, if you're on live, to ask a question. You can also ask a question if you're catching this after we post it. So please, let's see if Carrie's ready. Carrie, are you there? Can you hear me? How are you?
I'm there. I can hear you. How are you
Carrie,
tonight?
how are you? Good. How's it going? Thank you for joining us. Why don't you tell us a little bit about, you know, who you are, what you're doing, and, you know, whatever, give some background about your work in the field and start us off. How did you get into the field? What brought you into the field?
So, yes, I've always been interested really in school psychology and learning about people's behavior and why people act the way that they do. But first of all, Dr. Walker, I'd really like to thank you for inviting me on here tonight. This is wonderful. It's a great service that you're providing for their community, the opportunity for people to tune in a couple times a week and learn about mental health and mental illness, and it's a good way for them to learn about, you know, what's going on in their lives and get to the point that they could at some point hopefully feel comfortable seeking out help if they really need it. So
well, I appreciate you saying that, and that's the whole goal, because, you know, everyone has a degree of mental illness. Everyone has a degree of physical illness. If there's no shame in going to a dentist, there shouldn't be any shame in going to a psychologist. So I appreciate you saying that.
Sure.
So why don't you get us started? Should we bring up your slides, or how did you want to get going?
Sure. Can you see my slides?
Sure. Let's bring them up. So tell us a little bit about remote learning, about like what that means, how you've seen that affect our society.
Sure. So so really the purpose of tonight's session is really to help you and the families that are out there listening tonight. You know, remote learning, there's so many different terms that it can be called. Some people are calling it virtual learning. Some people are calling it e-learning or learning at a distance. It's really learning that is taking place not in the traditional school building. It's now kind of at your home. And so, you know, really over this past year, you know, this crisis that we've all been encountered with has impacted our lives in so many different ways. And even if you don't have children or your children are not currently in a remote learning situation, I really think that some of tonight's discussions will still be relevant. So not only are we going to be discussing remote learning and some ways that you can make it better for your children, but we can also discuss the effects of this crisis and how families can cope.
What are you seeing as one of the biggest impacts going on in the field, like from your perspective? Like if we look at like well, it's coincidental, your first slide's about a year ago. What do you see? Like, how do you see things shifting?
Yeah, so right now I know a lot of parents and teachers, some of their biggest concerns are the students not having that social interaction with the other kids because of being, at home and removed from their peers. So I think that's a really big concern. And then second is the academics and children falling behind academically because of the pandemic right now, and not being able to maybe tune in to remote learning as much as they need to, or there's a lot of families that don't have access, or they just don't have the resources and means to really be able to keep up with it. So that's really unfortunate. But so about a year ago from today is when
Amazing.
a lot of people, were just thrown into this online learning environment. And I was reading some news articles earlier today, and it was talking a little bit about how March 11th of last year was when the World Health Organization declared that there was this pandemic going on. And the NBA was suspending its season. And then shortly a few days after that, we're told to cancel our gatherings. We can't have gatherings of 50 or more people. And then shortly after that, it was reduced down to 10. So yes, this has been going on for about a year now. When I look back to last March around this time, it was my last day in an actual office, and I've been working remotely since then. I remember going up to my kids' school and picking them up. And there was just a lot of uncertainty, as there still is now. And I was picking my kids up, and it happened to be the time of spring break, and that we knew that we were coming home and we were going to start remote learning in a couple weeks. But we didn't know what that was going to look like. And as we learned, there were just all different experiences that people were having all across the country. Some kids had live learning sessions, others, the teachers just, had to mail out packets, and there wasn't anything virtual going on. Some schools even prohibited video conferencing because of some privacy concerns. Everyone was just really trying to figure everything out. And then on top of that, it's been a huge burden to parents as well, because not only were parents dealing with their regular caregiving responsibilities or responsibilities in the home and those working outside of the home, they were also kind of thrown into this role of teacher, even though it's not, our responsibility to be the teacher, kind of at that point, because everything was so up in the air, they were thrown into that role as well. So
sure, and all of a sudden, we have kids home, and we've got our normal marital issues that every relationship has, and now we've got, and that we're working from the house, or we're trying to maintain. People my 5-year-old is in my office a lot when I'm doing sessions, so the stress on parents has just been unbelievable. Not to mention the kids who are yanked out of their social situation and put in front of a computer screen. So there's just a lot of chaos going on.
Yeah, for sure. And so, this, as the school year started this year, things seemed to get better, in some areas, just in terms of getting a cadence going with what was expected for schools and how they were going to operate. But, it's still been a challenge. There's still a lot of students that are doing remote learning. Some cities have not even opened their schools yet. It's just a variation across the whole country. So there's just a lot going on there.
So let's talk a little bit about, just real quick, what's if kids are thrust into this situation and parents thinking, this remote learning isn't working. What can we do about that? What can I do to help my kid?
Yeah. So, so that's a really great question, and I think it varies from, family to family and school to school. I'd want to, talk to the family first and figure out, well, what is it about remote learning that isn't working for you? Is it, you're having trouble, connecting to the internet, or is it you're having trouble getting access to the school materials and maybe navigating the learning platform? Is it that maybe the home environment is just chaotic, and so it's just difficult to find the time and space to carve out time for learning? So I think that's a challenge.
Absolutely. So we're looking at some of the pandemic effects. Are you seeing this like on a daily basis with with kids you're working with, or like what are you seeing? What when you talk about the pandemic's effects, which one of these do you see as impacting the kids their ability to learn the most?
Yeah, all of these I think are really impacting
Sure.
those on a different level, and it really I think varies from family to family. But when we really look at the basic resources and kids' needs not being met at a basic level, that's really a challenge. Millions of families have been impacted financially with job losses and job changes. Many have had to leave jobs to care for the kids.
Mm.
Since this crisis has begun, over half of the families in our country have lost some sort of income.
Wow.
And I just read a statistic recently that 1 in 4 families are behind in rent.
Wow.
So it's really devastating. And then kind of when we look at resources like food and medical care and childcare, they're not as readily available as they once were. And then as recently as December, 1 in 5 families did not have enough food to eat. And this is actually 6 million more than even before the pandemic. So it's been certainly, a challenge. And then, even with the education, that's been at least partially disrupted for the majority of kids. It's just challenging, I think, in general, especially for younger kids, to really process the effects of what's going on, and just really kind of understanding it. Their sense of time is so much different, and so their sense of time and being out of school is feeling like they've been out of school forever, or haven't been
Sure.
able to see their friends forever, and so that's pretty challenging.
Absolutely.
I would like to, maybe put a little positive spin on it. While, there's so many negatives going on here, and, I'm not trying to downplay anything here at all, but, if there's anything we can try to do is try to focus on some of the positives, if any, that have come out of it. Maybe for some where their lives were so like hectic and chaotic, it's been a time that, things have slowed down. For others who have maybe lost their jobs and, just really feeling, the negative effects of that, maybe, a few months later, or maybe down the road, they'll find a new career path, and eventually be, happy with that and feel even more fulfilled with that than they were, prior to everything that had happened. But it might be hard to see right now.
No, but absolutely, you're right. And I think this is where we need as parents to up our parenting skills. This is where we need to really engage with kids, like your next, perfect timing again. Honey, how are you feeling? Are you anxious? Are you depressed? Are you feeling a sense of loss? What's loss, mommy? Well, loss is you don't have your school routine anymore. You don't have your friends anymore. So I think you're absolutely right. It's not about just focusing on the positive and eliminating the negative. It's about helping kids understand that they need to start engaging with how they feel and talking about how they feel. And sure, there's the negative, but there's also post-traumatic growth. How do we grow from this pandemic? How do we grow from the isolation? So that's an excellent point, because you're right. We need to teach kids early on that how they feel is important, and you need to talk to mommy and daddy about how you're feeling.
Yeah, those are all excellent points. And, especially for younger kids too, teaching them about the feelings. What do different types of feelings mean? And, what do I do when I feel a certain way? I mean, there's so many great, books out there. I mean, you can go to Amazon and type in feelings books, and there's just a lot of great resources that you can get and just, order it. They even have feeling cards that you can use with kids. But it's so important to talk about that and be able to articulate how you're feeling, and then work on some ways to express that appropriately.
Absolutely. And kids and as parents, we need to model that. Kids need to see mommy and daddy talking about their anxiety, their depression. As working with kids, a lot of parents will say, well, I don't want to flood them or overburden them or give them too much information. But I've found working with kids, as I'm sure you have, kids need more information. The lack of information makes a child project into the unknown, and a lot of things like ADHD in children is a kid who's just worrying out of their mind, or who is depressed, or who has problems that they don't know how to deal with.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, so when we kind of look at over the past, year, there's lots of research and studies coming out right now about some of these, psychological effects. There was a study done by Boston University in adults that found, after looking at data with mental health trends from a couple years ago, there's just been this increase in depression. Actually, the rates have been tripling. So that's certainly really disheartening. And then, as we're talking more about the kids, the Center for Disease Control reported that emergency visits rose by about 24% for children. Wow. And 31% for teens over the last year. So they're really. And
those
struggling.
Were for like physical illness or mental illness, or?
So it was like for a combination. Of both. So and certainly definitely an increase in self-harming behaviors. A lot of emergency rooms have seen as well. But, overall, we've seen in both children and adults an increase in, anxiety and depression and even grief and loss and just isolation. And if children aren't experiencing these conditions firsthand as a result of the pandemic, even if they're kind of really resilient, they are more at risk if there are, family members in the home that do have some mental health concerns, or, if the parents are struggling because they're, constantly in that environment, and they're, seeing the parents and kind of, what they're going through. So that can
absolutely. And if your kids are watching, if your kids are seeing you struggling, and if your kids are seeing you dealing with any kind of mental illness, try to talk to them about how that's impacting them. People, don't keep them in the dark. I'm not saying you have to give them all the details about what's going on, but try to fill them in on what you're struggling with.
Yeah. So, again, and so what I kind of like to highlight here, on this slide, I won't go into all the details, but, study after study after study is just coming out showing that the pandemic is being tied to poor parents and child mental health. We're seeing an increase in frequency of daily negative moods with children and parents, kind of just related to being on lockdown, and just related to all of the stresses with job loss and caregiver burdens. And then in one of these studies, I think the average hardships or difficulties that people were experiencing were at least 2. And there were only 14% of families that did not experience any hardship. So,
wow.
So I mean, really, so we're not alone. There's so many people that are just really struggling right now.
And if your kids are struggling, I always recommend, let's have family time to process. Let's set a time once or every other night. How you feeling? What's going on? I know most of us, I'm in my 50s now. I certainly didn't have that growing up. I certainly didn't have time that I could talk about how I felt. But parents, if you're out there and you're in that percentage where you feel your mental illness has gotten worse, you got to keep in mind that your kids are watching that and they're going to need an avenue to talk about that. And it doesn't have to be somebody like me and Carrie. It can be you. It can be you going in their room, playing their video game. It can be you doing anything you can to connect with them, riding bikes. So we need to definitely be conscious of what we are teaching our children about their own mental illness or mental health whenever they're watching us.
Yeah. And Stephen, you had mentioned something about, talking and spending time together. If families would just, have meals together more often, it would just be such a wonderful thing. So, if you can try, with your children, try to have at least, one meal a day together as a family. I know lives are just so hectic and everyone's, running around, but, even if you could take just 10 or 15 minutes together and just, sit down around that dinner table and, just check in and see how everyone's day was, and try to make it a positive time, save the criticism or, their chores and responsibilities or what they still need to do for after dinner. Just pause and, just really listen to them and be in the moment with them, during that meal time.
Absolutely. So in this, we're looking at education during the pandemic. What are we looking at here?
Yes, yeah. So again, just kind of reflecting on the past year and everything that's been happening with our education. So there's this association with, hunger and learning. A lot of our children, unfortunately, are hungry. They don't have enough to eat. When we don't have enough to eat, we're not, our brains aren't ready to function and learn. So, if food is scarce, and, there's really not much, I would say, prior to your child doing some of their learning, if they could get a little bit of, food in them to kind of help them focus, I would say that would probably be the best time for them to eat. Because, if they don't have food in their system, they're likely to have less energy. They're kind of more distracted. And studies have also shown that they may be less interested in doing some of their schoolwork as well. So that's really, challenging. I have on here, let's see, friends. Just that, unfortunately, that the social aspect, because
that's the
of
hard
these
part.
times, it really is. And so there, if you don't have those, opportunities to connect, if you don't have your quarantine group or, if you are not in the face-to-face environment, your children, try to find other ways to connect, whether that is through, FaceTiming some friends and, just trying to find a group that has similar interests and just, networking with them, because you need to have some type of social interaction. And I think that's important for all children.
Sure.
Even, children who are very anxious. I know some children who maybe have social anxiety or, maybe are thriving right now in the remote setting because they're not, having to physically be there. But even those children need connections and social interaction from time to time, even if it's just in small doses. It will really help make them feel better about themselves and help them feel a little bit more connected.
Exactly. And we have to, again, check in with our kids on how the lack of socializing is affecting them. And if there's ever been a time for parents to step up and, be more of your kid's friend, this is a time. This is a time to maybe break through a little bit of that fear of, oh, I've got to be the parent, and be their friend. Try to connect with them. Ask them, what do you miss doing with your friend? Let's go do it. Let's have some playtime.
Yeah, for sure. So just a couple other things that I wanted to mention here about the education. So, when we look back at other natural disasters, type of events that have happened in our country, like with Hurricane Katrina that happened back in 2005, and then Hurricane Maria that happened in 2017. As a result of those unfortunate incidents, about 12 to 20% of students never return to school. So, it's just
Wow.
really an educational crisis. Yeah. So, we have yet to see what the long-term effects of this, crisis is going to be. But, California has shared recently that 1 in 5 elementary school students have missed 10% of their classes already this school year, and that's been double the rate that it was last school year. And then another thing too is that public school enrollment in general, kind of across the country for the little pre-K and kindergartners, has dropped this past year. I think that's certainly explainable, especially if there's not the option to send your child to in-person learning, or you're not comfortable if that option is available to you, because it's really challenging for those 4 and 5-year-olds to sit in front of the computer and really engage in some type of an online learning. So a lot of parents are just overwhelmed, and they're just taking a break. And so if that's what you need to do for the young ones for this time, I think at some point they'll be able to have that opportunity to catch up. Really some of the best things you can do for the young kids especially is read to them. Read at least 20 minutes every day to them. Practice basic numbers and letter writing and skills. You can still do some of those activities while you're waiting for the schools to open back up.
And do you think, when you say routines, do you think it's better for kids to have like almost like a school time, like at 8 we're going to do this, at 9 we're going to have snack, or do you, being that the whole structure has changed, is it better to mix that up a little bit, or?
Yeah. So that's a great question. So our routines have totally been disrupted since the start of this, and so we've had to find something new. And so so some families, just have no routine. And then other families, we have the other end of the spectrum, are really, really strict. I think a good balance is to try to find something in the middle. I would say a routine that has some flexibility in it. Because even if kids, complain about routines, and you have kids,
Makes them feel secure,
or don't want to do this, it really does. And, they may not, admit that, or, have the awareness to be able to articulate that. But it really does give them a sense of, safety and security. They're able to really, predict what comes next. They know what's expected of them. And without having any of those routines, that's where, you may see an increase in, acting out behaviors, just attention concerns, and it can really just spiral downhill. So, I would say that routines are certainly important. They don't have to be so rigid that you have, every single hour accounted for, but, I would suggest having kind of a loose morning routine where you have certain expectations, and same for what they're going to do throughout the day, and then certainly a good bedtime routine. With routines, I think it's a great idea also to have children wake up about the same time in the morning, and at night go to the bed about the same time every night. Kids need rest. Even those kids that just have seem to have lots of energy all the time. Right. Their body still needs to rest, and their brain needs to recharge, and they need to be in a good position to learn. So, even those kids that are doing remote learning, that's maybe they don't have any live sessions, and it's just kind of like, here are your assignments for the week. Do them whenever. Those situations scare me a little when there's that loose, there's no structure there. So, because then it's really up to the parents then to kind of work with their child to get it done. And so that's when, the family needs to kind of step in and say, okay, you can, you have the whole week to do, all these assignments, but, you're still going to get up at 8, and, you're still going to go to bed at this time. and we're kind of expecting you during these hours that you'll spend X amount of time working on it. So certainly having some expectations there.
And you talked a minute ago also about reading to your kids, which is, I think I agree with you 100% is such a great tool, because not only does it get kids familiar with words and letters, but it also is bonding time. It also is a time when, kids can bond with their parents. But let's say a child is struggling with reading, they're doing the work, they're attending the classes. Does that mean they have a learning disability? And if they do, what can we do about that?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So, I would say, for anyone who has concerns with their child's academics, whether it's, reading or math or writing, talk to your child's teacher, get into communication with them, schedule a brief conference, or if you're really hesitant to maybe talk to them directly, send them an email and express what your concerns are. You can just check in and say, hey, how's my child doing with reading? I'm feeling that maybe they're struggling, and it could be that maybe there could be a mismatch between where the parent thinks their child should be with reading versus where developmentally they should be at that point, or the opposite could be true. But the school can provide information in terms of where your child is academically and where they're expected to be. Like I'd mentioned, read your child every day, 20 minutes. Have them try to do some independent reading on their own. The school can do some additional interventions with them. So, for example, that may look like spending extra time with them, whether it's one-on-one, either like in person or through a Zoom session, or it might be a small group session where they're doing more intensive reading work together. So they can certainly come up with some interventions and work with them there. So that would be a first step. If your child is still really struggling after all of those interventions, and the school is concerned with their progress as well, then the next step may be to participate in what's called a psychoeducational evaluation. And that's just a fancy word for saying that a school psychologist will come in and administer some tests, do some tasks with your child, and see kind of where are they with their reading skills, where are they with their math. They may also look at their language skills, their cognitive abilities, their attention. All these different processes go into how we learn. And then from a result of all that testing, they can put together a learning profile and come up with some recommendations for some supports. If it's a learning disability, then and we'll know what that specific learning disability is, whether it's reading, writing, or math, and then the school will be able to tailor some interventions to help with that. And then if it's not a learning disability, the child may still benefit from some other types of supports or interventions, and so the school can really help you work with that as well. But school psychologists should be able to do the evaluations through the school system. So so the parent wouldn't necessarily need to go out themselves to like an outside provider from the school unless they wanted to.
And when you're talking about families needing resources to support remote learning, tell us, we all hear this term IEP. What is that? What is that? I mean, break that down for us. What is that?
Sure. So an IEP is an individualized education plan. And so that comes from the results of the psychoeducational evaluation that the school psychologist does with the child. And in that detailed plan lists all of the goals and strategies for what they're going to do with the child in the school setting to help that child get on grade level. And so all that, it's a very detailed plan, and the parents are involved with it. They have input into that process. So when the school is reviewing that plan with them, they will go over it step by step, and the parents can talk a little bit about if they can provide their input, if they feel that maybe their child needs something else, or a different type of service, they're able to kind of provide some input, and they'll work together with the school to establish this agreement. And so that plan then is in place for a full year, and then when that year is up, another plan, that plan is revised, and a new one is developed. But what sometimes I think parents don't realize is, if at any point during the school year, when your child has this IEP, if things are not going the right way, and you feel that interventions need to be adjusted, or something just isn't working out, you have that right as the parent to go back to the school and have the school team get together and relook at that IEP and make some adjustments to it.
Okay, and can a child who is on an IEP then get off an IEP, or do they have to stay on that IEP for the rest of their school years?
Mm-hmm. So depending on the educational diagnosis as a result of the psychoeducational evaluation, there's a time frame in terms of when reevaluations will occur, meaning that. So, for example, and this can vary from state to state too,
Sure.
but in some states, like every 3 years, a child who was diagnosed with a learning disability will need to be reevaluated to see if they still qualify to receive those services. So it doesn't necessarily stay with them for life. If the child is making a lot of progress and meets all of their goals, and the school and parents agree that the child no longer needs services, they can be dismissed from services at any time. The parents do need to give permission. So if a child has an IEP, so IEPs cannot be implemented without the parent support.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, so what other resources can help support remote learning?
Yeah. So, as I was going through and, reading the research and seeing what was out there, and, talking to families, I realized there wasn't out there much for parents directly in terms of remote learning. A lot of what was out there was geared towards professionals and other researchers and teachers and administrators, but really, not for the parents. And, a lot of the parents and administrators are, trying to figure out, how to navigate these systems and the logistics of everything, and then trying to get their students into the classroom and get them set up, that the parents were kind of last on the list here. So because there wasn't a lot out there, I was looking into this, and so I put a book together, and this book that I put together is really to help support remote learners of all ages. It gives us some information on expectations and like routines that we were talking about, and structure, and how they're really crucial for success. That's just kind of the foundation. And the information in this book can really be used for students that are in a hybrid setting as well. And then some of the strategies can also be applied for homework time, or when kids are just doing schoolwork at home. Really, I wanted just to have this guide out there, really to try to take the so-called pain out of the remote learning, and try to infuse it a little bit with some joy, and to help encourage a love of learning.
That's great. And that's a great resource too, because, one of the things that I've found, or one of the things I'll ask you about, is like, how do people know when whatever they're struggling with needs some sort of professional intervention? So let's say the family is struggling with something, but they don't really know, like, do I need a psychologist? Do I need a school psychologist? How do they differentiate with that?
Yeah. So I think it's always, first trying to to clearly define, what's going on. So,
Mm.
if it's an issue going on with your child, try to kind of talk it through with them and figure out what it is that they're struggling with, and see if it's something that you can help them with first. Or see if you have some other resources to do so. If the child, though, for example, I mean, this would certainly be what I would consider a red flag, is expressing thoughts of wanting to hurt themselves, or wanting to hurt other people. That is definitely not something that should be ignored or downplayed. Sometimes parents may say, "Oh, the child's just doing this for attention." The child is really hurting in some way. Maybe they truly don't want to, hurt themselves or injure themselves, but it's a cry for help. They're wanting some sort of attention because they're in some sort of pain. Some need is not being met. They're not able to, express themselves in some way. So that would definitely be the time that I would say, immediately, reach out to your, pediatrician, as a first step, or go to a psychologist. If there's immediate danger, certainly take your child to the emergency room, but, do not ignore those signs.
Don't ignore them, but also don't overreact too. Don't
Yes,
think, that your child is going to feed off of that stress and fear you're
exactly.
feeling. Try to calm them down. Say, look, whatever you're feeling can be worked on. Don't let, hopelessness is one of the
Yeah.
main causes of suicide. And
Hmm.
when if you can allow your child to believe, hey, you're feeling something pretty intensely negative, but we can work on it. It's kind of
Yeah.
like having a flu. It's kind of like
Hmm.
having any kind of severe physical illness. There are ways we can deal with it. You've got to create hope for that child to believe that whatever they're going through might just be temporary, might just be passing.
Yeah, yeah. So and listen to them. Provide reassurance. We'll get through this together.
Absolutely. And Penny is asking a great question. How can a grandparent best help in this area when all the kid would rather do is play? What do you see like a grandparent's role in helping with remote learning?
Hmm. When all the kids want to do is play. So I would say build in some playtime.
Yeah, exactly.
Play is good. There's certainly nothing wrong with play. I would say, and I don't know what your remote learning situation is like, Penny, but if you have the opportunity to kind of, I guess log on or do work at different times, then I would say, work with the child to, say, okay, we're going to work on this for 10 minutes. And as your reward, you will get to play. So I would say, make play or certain parts of the play, or, a certain game or toy that they really like, kind of a reward for actually, logging on or doing the assignments. So that could certainly be one way.
Excellent, excellent. And Juan is asking, my little cuz is a little afraid of being around other kids. Not sure if that's linked to COVID. What would you recommend to coach them through being close and around strangers?
Hmm. Yeah, that is a really great question. Yeah, so I would say, the first step, because you said you're not really sure if it's related to the pandemic. I would say, talk to the child, and see if you can try to figure out what some of their concerns are. Is the child really, scared that they're going to get sick, being around people? Has the child been exposed to conversations about the pandemic and all of the awful news that is
Hmm.
going on? All of that exposure to the news and the media, or even hearing adults talk about it, can make children fearful. And so I think, the one step is to try to, get to the bottom of that, and to provide the child reassurance. I would certainly say don't lie to the child, because you don't know 100% if the child, will be exposed. But, you can emphasize that, we're taking precautions, and You can share that, in some situations it may be safe to do so. Part of it too is kind of the comfort level of the parent too, right? Because I mean, right now there's some families that just aren't, comfortable being, around others that are outside their family unit, and that's okay. But Juan, if your family has, been around others, and you're just wanting your child to be, close to someone, I would say start with one small, or start with one friend, and maybe have some sort of a Zoom or FaceTime, interaction first. Work to get comfortable, and then maybe the next step, maybe you'd want to have one meet the friend outside somewhere in an open area, and maybe they could be over 6 feet away from each other, and they
Sure.
can at least be around, but be far enough where maybe he would feel comfortable.
Absolutely. And, Carrie, you mentioned earlier about social anxiety and how a lot of kids with
Mhm.
social anxiety are actually thriving in this environment. So, Juan, I would encourage you to, talk to your kids. Say, hey, look, I've noticed you're kind of afraid to be around other kids. What's going on there? Are there some issues that you have with, feeling bad about yourself? Or do you not know how to make a friend? I think one of the
Mhm.
things parents, we all need to do more in our relationships but we need to engage with the child. We need to engage with our wife. We need to engage with our husband. We need to sit down and say, hey, look, I've noticed this. Tell me what's going on with that. What are you feeling about when you're around other kids? Communication sets kids up for
Mhm.
to be lifelong communicators, and they start modeling that with their friends. They'll start saying, hey, what's going on with you? I
Yeah.
think part of what we don't do is we don't talk to kids enough about what they're afraid of, because we
Mhm.
either we don't know how to answer it, or we don't want to admit that, oh, maybe my kid does have some issues.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
So I know we're getting close to running out of time here, Carrie. Was there
Mhm.
any other slides or anything in particular that you wanted to get to before we get to some more questions?
Sure. So yeah, so real quickly with this slide, and I won't go into all the
No, it's
details.
okay,
It's
but this
kind
is a
of,
great one.
yeah. So and this is sort of the premise of my book. So all of these 6 components are really essential, I feel, to have a successful remote learning environment. As some of us have probably figured out, you can't just put your kid in front of the computer and say, here, do the work, and then run off, and then everything will magically be done. The physical setup is only one part of it. And then there's also the e-learning considerations, which really includes all the things students should be doing during the learning process to maximize their success. Then we have the emotional considerations, just looking at the child's emotional state and needs, meaning how are they feeling? What can you do to help? We've talked a lot about that already, and so I have some good strategies for that. Also motivational strategies, and we touched on that a little bit earlier. I have some good tips on finding out what can you do to keep your kid motivated and engaged in online learning, because there has to be some motivation to get the work done. Otherwise, it's not going to get done.
And
Homeschool.
just to ask
Mhm.
about, sorry, about motivational strategies, do you negotiate those motivational strategies with the kid? Do you find out what
Mhm.
would motivate them, or do you impose that, not impose, but do you suggest
Yeah.
those, or is it a combination of both?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really great to get the child's input, right?
Hmm.
Because you get their input, then you know what is motivating them. What is it that they want? How are they getting their needs met? And so you can really work together to figure out what that is. Because if you pretty much tell them what the motivation is or what it's going to be, I mean, they're going to be even less motivated. So it helps give them, I mean, you as the caregiver, you have the ultimate control, but you're letting the child have a say in it. And it helps build that confidence, and will help build them with having some success in the remote learning situation. And then we also
Absolutely.
have homeschool communication, which we also talked a little bit about this. You really need to have some, good communication between the home and school environment. I know that, sometimes there's, parents and families out there, they went through school and didn't have really good experiences. So, the teachers or just administrators, it could seem, scary or like a threatening, an environment to them. But the teacher is really there to help the kids. And I really think that they have, the best interest of the kids at heart. And so they want all their kids to be successful. So I think, reaching out to them will help, and there's certainly no shame in it, because they want to do what they can. And the teachers can only know sometimes if you tell them what's going on.
Sure. And Penny's making a good comment here. The children
Yeah.
are on remote, but the major issue she has or has had is the teacher and the parent communicating. She's saying you shouldn't have to wait until the next review when there's a glitch in their program. The teacher tells you she is there, but not really. So, and I didn't ask you this, Carrie, but I started in this field as a teacher. I don't think a lot of times people are aware of the pressures teachers are under to perform for their kids. So what would you say to Penny's comment?
Yeah, so it's challenging for sure, Penny, and everyone has so much on their plate right now. I would say to again, try to reach out to the teacher individually. Whether that's through email or chat, whatever platform. Just share your concern. And if you're not hearing back, I would say reach out to another administrator for help, because certainly if it's a platform issue that's like impacting the child's ability to really like access certain parts of the materials in the curriculum, sometimes that's really beyond the teacher's control, and it might not be something that they're able to fix from their end. So someone else certainly needs to be involved.
Okay, excellent. And so I guess we can close out with, from the parent's point of view, they continue to feel overwhelmed as a parent through all this remote learning. What can they do to cope? What are some, there you go. What are some cares? Let's end with that. What are self-care activities? What are you talking about? I'm a parent. I'm not supposed to have any needs, right? I mean, everything's supposed to be about my kids.
Yeah. And I think there's also a lot of guilt that parents feel if they are taking the time to pay attention to their self and their needs, because, oh my gosh, now I am not paying attention to my kid and I'm ignoring them. When in fact, almost the opposite is true. If you don't take time to take care of yourself, you're not really in the best position to be taking care of your children. So, even as simple as, something like, I just need like 5 minutes to like,
To scream.
my coffee. Yeah, to scream. Or like, 5 minutes to finish my coffee and have this, alone time before I kind of start my hectic morning routine with, running around and getting the kids ready, just, making the time to do that. But then, but also, recognizing yourself too, that if you are, working with your child on something and maybe they are, I don't know, not following the directions or not listening, and you're losing your patience quickly, recognizing yourself that, oh my gosh, like I'm starting to feel like really angry about this situation. And okay, my child's just having a hard time right now. I shouldn't blow up at them. So I need to stop myself, remove myself from the situation and just take a minute. So, being in tune with our own feelings and trying to take a step back. So even, for example, if, you're feeling really stressed out about something, in your personal life or at work, and then you're around your child, you don't want to take that out on them. You want to make sure that you take a few minutes to kind of deal with that situation away from them, before you interact with them. But also, if I could add, other self-care activities, certainly are, trying to, take some time to exercise, even if you only have like 15 minutes just to kind of, get out for a walk. That would be great.
And you can involve your kids. You can involve
Yes.
your kids in your self-care. You can ask your
Mm-hmm.
kids, how do you think mommy is feeling? Or how do you think daddy's feeling right now? You can say, hey, you know what? We're going to spend the next 10 or 15 minutes taking care of mommy, taking care of daddy. That is a great way to help kids understand and learn empathy. And you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned a second ago, if you do have an interruption and you do raise your voice, as we all do as parents, we can't keep it together perfectly. Apologize to your child. Tell
Mm-hmm.
them you're sorry for if you hurt their feelings, but also let them know what they can do to help not
Mm-hmm.
contribute to you feeling like you need to raise your voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. I mean, self-care is important, yeah, for parents and children as well.
Mm,
So everyone can benefit from self-care, and we need to make the time to do it. And I would say start small. Don't feel like you need to do everything. If your one self-care activity is making sure that you get to bed at a consistent decent time every night. And you had previously been staying up all hours, then that is a great step in the right direction. So that kind of goes to my last slide here. We are so hard on ourselves, I think a lot of times as parents, because we want the best for our kids, and
perfect. We got to be
we want everything
perfect.
to be perfect. Yes, we see the exterior of other families, or these things on social media that make everything look like it's perfect on the surface. It's
You mean
not.
there's a separate
Everyone.
story to that? There's something we're not seeing? Exactly.
Yeah, everyone has their battles.
And be kind to yourself is one of the
Yeah.
themes of these live streams, is that my firm belief is your relationship with yourself should be your primary relationship, should be something that you're thinking about on a daily basis on how to
Hmm.
relate better to yourself.
Yeah.
Well, Carrie, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate you giving up an hour of your evening time to come on and help people who are struggling with remote learning with their children. Please check out Carrie's book. Remember, guys, no one's paying us to do this. Nobody is forcing us to do this. We're doing this because we love what we do. We love helping people. We love trying to ease emotional and psychological pain. So, Carrie, any last closing tidbit before we end here?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to share with everyone. I really hope that if I helped at least one person tonight, I think that's a great step in the right direction. Again, we've talked a lot about a lot of different things that you can do. Just start with one thing. That you've learned here today. So my challenge for you is take one thing that you've learned and implement it in the next day or two.
Great. Well, thank you for coming on. Hopefully we'll have you back again. Maybe we'll have another interview once things go back to normal, and
Yeah.
incorporating what kids, how kids transition from learning to back into the mainstream learning. So thank you again. Really appreciate you coming on, Carrie. And this is Carrie's website, everybody. If anybody wants to check it out, she got a link to your book. I posted it twice on the chat stream. I'll post it again in a second. But thank you, Carrie. Really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Have a
have a
great night,
great night. You
everybody.
too.
All
Thanks.
right. Bye.
Whoops. I stepped on your goodbye there. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So that was Carrie, Dr. Morera. She's on talking about all of the psychological and emotional forces that are not only pressing on kids, but are pressing on parents. So guys, the main thing I hope you heard at the end there was self-care, taking care of yourself during this, talking to your kids, making sure they're okay, accessing resources, try to keep communications going between you and the school. Above all, let's not give up. There's a light at the end of the tunnel here. We're getting some hope that things might return to a sense of normalcy. Talk to your kids about that. Give them hope. Give them something to look forward to, in the sense that there will be some normalcy coming back to the process. So please check out Carrie's website. get a copy of Carrie's book. It's a great resource. And I will see you again next week. We're going to have some more interesting topics and guests. But thank you for coming on, and I will see you again next Tuesday and Thursday. All right, everybody, have a great weekend. Feel free to shoot me any questions. Check out Carrie's website, ask her some questions, but above all, do not stop working on your mental health. That is one of the most important things that is affecting our world and our society. People are not dealing with how they feel. Okay. All right, guys, have a great night.